Hello, everyone. I am really excited to have this conversation with my mentor, who I've been led to by my husband, and it's been an incredible awakening to some really dark truths about the way our world is run. And I just want to start by saying this is all against God, and everything that is happening right now is an attack on God and God's people. And there's not too many people out there who are speaking the truth about what's happening and who is actually at the top, and then how it trickles down into every single sector of society. There's not too many people speaking about that until my husband led me to Eric John Phelps. And I met Eric about 2 years ago. Yeah, 2 years ago. And my husband had me take his class. He's like, you have to take his class. We have to take his class together. And he actually married my husband and I. And it's been a wonderful path walking with him, with learning this knowledge that he has bestowed upon my husband and I. I mean, there's not too many people out there who know what Eric knows and teaches it so passionately. And the one thing that he speaks on is income tax. And we talk about income tax and avoiding income tax, but it's not really avoiding income tax. It's really truly asset protection. And Eric, we're really going to have a really good conversation, because I want to talk about how income tax is, it's not very Christian to be paying. And that's going to be very hard for many people to hear. So we're going to have a really good conversation about, because a lot of Christians are like, well, we give back to Caesar what is Caesar's. And I want to go into depth of what your thoughts are on that, because that's where I think a lot of, Christian people are like, well, that's what it says in the Bible. So when it comes to paying income tax, I have found it is the most evil way to, you're paying into the evil of what's happening. You're paying into the very slavery that we're all complaining about. So to start, I want to talk to Eric. Eric, how did you awaken to that and say, I'm not participating in that anymore, and I'm going to teach others into not participating in that anymore?
Well, nice to be with you, Tanya, and your listeners today. It all started for me back in 1981, when I decided I wasn't going to finance abortion anymore.
Amen.
So that led to a host of difficulties, and ultimately, I've probably made every mistake possible. And but fortunately, I was able to get out of a huge IRS assessment that they had for me for $200,000. So, but then I was praying, Lord, there has to be a simple way to this. And I stayed up for a couple of weeks. I didn't do anything but this. I went through all the things that I had. I took the works of a couple other men that were doing, that I believe were correct on a couple of matters. And then my wife got a letter from the IRS stating that she owed $47,000 or whatever as a result of PayPal. It was a $47,000 report from PayPal. Well, that's when she was handling my stuff, and I just used her PayPal account. So I said, okay, but when they sent this letter, they sent with it pull the form 15103, 1040 return delinquency. And on this 2-page form of the IRS, Treasury form, IRS one, it says, if you don't think you're required to file a tax return for such and such a year, tell us why. And I've been looking for that for 20 years. So that means that some people, even though they have income, are not required to file a tax return. So I put together a 30-page memorandum of law with an affidavit, and I filled out this Form 15103, return delinquency, and sent it in for Anita. She signed it. And that was the end of all inquiries for her. I did the same form.
And the same has been happening with my husband.
Same with your husband.
Mm-hmm.
Same with Rebecca. He got a letter from the IRS. So we don't need to talk about it anymore, whatever it is. So he won with the Form 15103. The most recent one I got from one of my students was my son Jordan. They sent him the letter. We agree with you. You're not required to file a tax return for such and such a year, or the above year.
And
so,
excuse me for 1 second. This was, and I want to clarify something, because if you are not an employee of the government, you paying income tax is completely voluntary.
Correct. It's in the definition, 2 words, 2 legal terms that the Congress has specifically defined. First one is employee. Second little phrase is called trade or business. And what's his name? Pete Hendrickson, in his book, Cracking the Code, rightly shows what the real definitions are. So does David Williams in his work that he put out in 2017. Both those guys are correct. Employee only means someone working for the federal, state, county, or city government, because the word includes is also a specially defined word. And it's defined by the Supreme Court. Supreme Court defines the word includes as only what follows, not what you think the word employee means plus what follows. It's not a term of enlargement. It's a term of exclusion. So only what follows the word includes is what the definition is. And so it's only someone that works for the federal, state, county, city government. So that if you're not that public employee, then you do not have gross income. Gross income is 2 things. It's income derived from a source. That is gross income. So you have to have income and you have to have a source for that income. There are only 2 sources: employee, trade or business. Employee working for the government, federal, state, county, city. Trade or business. Trade or business includes performing the functions of a public office, whether you're elected or appointed, like a judge, president. So if you're not a Supreme Court justice, if you're not performing the functions of a public office, you do not have a quote unquote trade or business. Okay? So that means everybody in the private sector that has a business, or he's in a trade, he's laying block or tying rebar, whatever he's doing, he doesn't have a trade or business. Everybody that's working in the private sector, giving his intellectual property or physical property or labor, whatever, in exchange for money, he's not an employee. He's not a public employee as defined by the Internal Revenue Code. He's an employee, he's a private employee, but he's not a public employee defined by the Internal Revenue Code. So therefore, there's a special way to fill out a W-4. If the guy that you're working for insists that you fill it out, like I teach that in my class. It's a W-4 exempt. In order to do that, you have to file a Form 15103 with attached affidavit for the previous year so you can properly fill it out, exempt, and then you're going to sign it. Signed involuntarily, under duress, offer refused. What offer are you refusing? You're refusing the offer to be a public employee. So then they won't withhold on the paychecks. So that's it. That's the tax class. If you are not an employee, quote unquote, or involved in a trade or business, quote unquote, you have no gross income. If you have no gross income, you're not required to file a tax return for that year. However, when you get reports, when you get information reports, like a W-2 sent to the IRS or a 1099, only government payers or employers fill out those forms, but the average businessman doesn't know that. And when he fills out those forms and he sends them to the IRS, he's creating a presumption that your little business or you working for somebody has gross income. Based upon that presumption, the IRS can expect a tax return, and rightfully so. So what you have to do is rebut the presumption that you have gross income as reported on a W-2 or a 1099. And when you rebut the presumption with the 1040, Form 1040 return delinquency with attached affidavit, the IRS goes away. You answered the presumption and you rebutted it, and they will leave you alone because they know their limitations. You are working as a matter of fundamental right, protected by the 9th Amendment, protected by a series of Supreme Court decisions that I set forth in my memorandum of law. And therefore, when you are working as a matter of fundamental right, all you get is income, but you do not get any gross income because you don't have a source for that income. You're working as a matter of fundamental right. It works as a matter of fundamental right. All you have is income. You have no gross income. You're not an employee. You're not involved in trade or business. Anybody sends in a W-2 or 1099, creating the presumption that you have gross income, you rebut it with a Form 15103. The IRS will leave you alone and never seize your bank account. And that's it. Are you there, Tanya? Are you there, Tanya?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Hear you now, yeah.
Okay.
So that's it.
I was
All there is to it.
Yeah, I mean, when my husband got that letter back, he's like, oh, wow. And, you know, because so many people have tried to opt out of paying income tax, and it's not, again, you know, to avoid, someone just asked, it's the 415-103, correct, right?
15103, Form 15103. You can get it on the web. It's called the return delinquency.
Okay. Did you get that? If you didn't, I'll have him repeat it. But yes, it's been, you know, but you know, for me too, it's so infuriating to see what they are like. How did the IRS even become so powerful here? Like, how did they become who they are?
They became so powerful because the CPAs and the lawyers are all mistaught in universities, that the Jesuits run the universities to teach them that everybody owes the income tax. And that's not true. That teaching gets you to volunteer to be a quote unquote employee or a quote unquote trade or business. Once you volunteer and once you file that tax return, it's over. I can't help you. I get everybody to volunteer. And remember, justice will not come to the aid of a volunteer. Equity will not come to the aid of a volunteer. So what they've done is they've gotten us to volunteer. And so you're no longer going to volunteer if you work in the private sector. If you're a police officer, if you're in the U.S. military, if you're, you know, working for the government as the mayor, whatever, you have gross income and you have to file a tax return. But if you're not working those things, you're not required. You can volunteer. You can fill out a W-4. You can have them withhold. You can volunteer to pay that ungodly war tax, but you don't have to.
What do you think about the whole, the IRS agents now buying, what was it, I don't want to give out misinfo, but it's a pretty.
87,000 more. That's right. 87,000 more agents. Mm-hmm.
And they're allowed, but furthermore, the ammo that they just purchased.
Yeah, they have the government, the military government, which we've been under since 1933, has over 2 billion hollow point rounds. The hollow points are illegal in war, but they're not illegal to use on enemy belligerents living in occupied territories like all the U.S. citizens. That's not the point here. The point is, I don't care if they hire 1 million new IRS agents. The law is still the law. The Constitution is still in place. Supreme Court decisions are still in place. So you're not going to be intimidated by them. You're going to file the 15103 every year. Every year anybody sends in a W-2 or 1099 on you, file 15103 every year.
Because that's what they are. They're bullies. They're bullies.
Of course they're bullies.
And I don't like to be bullied, and I don't stand down to bullies.
Good. That's very good. And we shouldn't. We are Americans. We have our rights. We have our rights secured in the greatest Constitution ever written, the greatest treatise ever defending. It's called the Federalist Papers, ever written on government. Greatest treatise ever written. And we need to defend it while we can. So we stand on its rights. Like the Jefferson said, he who stands on his own rights injures no one. And bind them down to the chains of the Constitution where they can do no mischief. And that's what we're doing. This is proper tax avoidance. We're avoiding the tax by not volunteering to pay it. That's all there is.
Now let's talk about giving back to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. What do you say to that?
Okay, let's go to Romans 13, which is where that verse is. Romans 13, let me read. Okay. Wherefore, verse 5, wherefore you must needs be subject, not only for wrath or conscience sakes. For this cause pay ye tribute also. That's tax. They are God's ministers, attending continually upon this very thing. Render therefore to all their dues. Tribute to whom tribute is due, custom to whom custom, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor. So this defends rightful taxation. There's nothing wrong with the Internal Revenue Service. It's their intimidating tactics that are wrong. The law they're enforcing is fine. It's their intimidating tactics that are sin. Okay? So we read this verse, we're to pay tax, tribute. And we're to pay tribute to whom tribute is due. Well, all the people working in the public sector, everybody who's an employee, government employee, or involved in a trade or business performing the functions of a public office is to pay that tax. That's what Romans 13 teaches. But if you're not doing those things, you are not required to pay that tax unless you volunteer. And if you volunteer by signing a W-2 without a qualified signature, if you volunteer by signing a W-9 without a qualified signature, then you volunteered to be a government employee and a government trade or business, and you owe the tax. They trick us into volunteering, but if we don't volunteer and we know our right under the Ninth Amendment, the right to our fundamental rights that's reserved by the Ninth Amendment, which fundamental right includes the right to work, exchange our physical property for money, our labor for money, or our intellectual property for money. We're exercising our fundamental right. We do not derive any gross income because it's not a privilege granted from government. We're not in privilege working as a government employee or a government trade or business. So We uphold Romans 13 for all the government workers. Everybody in the military, you owe the income tax. Everybody that's a police officer, you owe the income tax. Everybody that's pensioned off a government job, that pension is income taxable. But for those who are in the private sector, which is the vast majority of the American people, absolutely not.
That's disturbing. You know, they're taxing the military.
Well, they're federal employees.
It's just
Federal employees, right?
but
But
thanks for that.
Go ahead, pardon me.
Thanks for clarifying that, because, you know, a lot of Christians are battling, you know, well, you know, this is what it says in the Bible, and, you know, but at the same time, people don't truly understand what the income tax is supporting.
Right, supporting everything that wants to destroy us. Remember, the Jesuits, when they put together the Communist Manifesto using Karl Marx, as he was tutored by Peter Bex, the one who would be the Jesuit general for the 1840s and 50s, and they were tutoring him in the British Museum and writing the Communist Manifesto. One of the 10 planks of their manifesto that they perfected on their Paraguayan reductions for 150 years is a heavy and progressive income tax. And they put that on the British in 1854, thereabouts, and they put it on us in 1942, 43, thereabouts. So, but we volunteered. The British volunteered. They don't know it. All the Commonwealth countries, they all volunteered. So here in America, we have it very clear that we have fundamental rights to work, protected by Supreme Court decisions, and therefore you cannot tax income derived from a fundamental right. But you can tax income derived from a government-granted privilege, which is being an employee or trade or business as defined in the Internal Revenue Code. Okay?
Yeah, and that's
it.
Yeah, and that's the good difference, because it sums it up really well. You know, if you are working for the government, you do pay your taxes through that income. And if you are not, then it is completely voluntary. And you want to know the craziest thing is how people will defend taxes. That's how indoctrinated many have become. Like they'll say, we need to pay taxes. We have to pay taxes. It's good to pay taxes. And
we need to pay taxes because the Bible says we should. However, what kind of tax? That's the question.
Income.
The income tax is an indirect excise tax. That means it's a tax on income derived from government-granted privilege. That's what it is. And excise taxes are always avoidable. Always avoidable. So tell them, well, yes, we need to pay tax. We want to support infrastructure. However, if you read the Grace Commission of 1984-85, thereabouts, United Malta J. Peter Grace put it together under Reagan's administration. He tells you that there's not one red cent that goes to internal improvements. It all goes to interest on the national debt. So that's another reason why we shouldn't volunteer to pay the income tax, because to pay interest on the national debt, what a sin and a crime. And we're not doing it. We should pay indirect taxes and direct taxes, and they should all be for the benefit of we the people. The Constitution is a trust. Everybody, the powers that we delegated as we the people, we created certain Article 1, 2, and 3, the Congress, the executive, and the Supreme Court, to make rulings and to pass laws and to enforce laws for our benefit. We the people are the beneficiaries of that trust document. The people in the government are the trustees. They have the duty to perform, the duty to exercise the powers that we delegated to them, and to go no farther than that. Government is a wonderful thing when properly working, as evidenced by the history of this country till about 1900. So we want good government, and we want to pay taxes, and we want hard money. We want gold and silver. We want to pay the taxes that need to rightfully be collected to finance the real post office, and to finance the military, and to finance the courts, and to finance everything you see in that Article 1 of the Constitution, where the Congress can spend money on 18 things, and 18 things alone. It's not supposed to be a parliament where they can spend money on anything they want. That's a British parliament. So a constant Congress is limited in the money and the powers that it has to spend money. And there are only 18 things it can spend money on. That's what we need to go back to. But in the meantime, before we can go back to that and get rid of this military government, go back to civilian government, the military government was imposed on March 9th, 1933 by FDR. When we get back to civilian government, then we can go back to limited taxation. We can go back to honest money, where people can really prosper and own their property and have title to their land and their movable properties, and they can have a life and begin to develop their abilities and may have new inventions and raise their children to be the smartest and most literate people in the world, as the Americans were in the mid-1800s. So we can go back to that if we want to, but I say the first step is we got to stop volunteering to pay this heavy progressive socialist communist graduated income tax. And it's easy to do. I have 6 victories, 6 or 7 so far. And your husband's one of them, Tanya.
Yeah, it's it's a trial and error process, but you definitely cracked the code on doing this correctly, because a lot of people, they don't, and they do end up in jail, and you have to file every year, like Eric said, with a 30-page, it's 30 or 40 pages.
It's your form 15103, which is a government form 1040, return delinquency, with the attached 30-page affidavit, explaining to them why you're not required to file a tax return. And to boil it down, you have no gross income because you have no source of income. You just have income. You have no source. Employee, trade, or business. You're working as a matter of fundamental right, protected by this Supreme Court decision, this one, this one, this one. It's over. Nothing more you need to learn.
But there was
in this income tax since 1981. I've seen it all. George Gordon, Irwin Schiff, Graham, all the Golden Mean Society, National Commodity and Barter Association. I've been through all of it. And it's very, very simple. You're not an employee, not a trade or business. Therefore, you do not owe the heavy progressive income tax. You're not required to file a tax return. And that's exactly what the IRS says when they send you why we are contacting you a letter. This is why we are contacting you. We agree with you. You're not required to file a tax return for this year above here. They say that to you in a letter. And I show those letters to you in my class. I just put in evidence for a case in an affidavit. I showed 4 of those letters I've gotten, put in the affidavit and gave it for a case because this IRS agent wrongfully put in a lock-in letter on one of my students. And so he has to sue her. So he put an affidavit showing this. And so she's going to be ordered to stop the lock-in letter because she's a little tyrant out of Austin, Texas. So if they do anything, then we sue them. If they're not going to do anything, because there's a couple of ladies down there in Austin, they know us. We send the paperwork right to them. We get the letter.
They know you there. That's great.
Yeah. And I like them. They're nice because they're doing their job.
Mm-hmm. And you made some really good points, because it's not about the tax. Of course, we want a strong, good military. We want, all the list of what you went down, but it's the type of tax, and the income tax is one, unconstitutional. And
no, it is constitutional here. The income tax is constitutional. The Bruce-Shaper decision in 1916 said the 16th Amendment is constitutional. Don't ever say it's unconstitutional. That just gets in trouble.
Oh,
because it is constitutional.
and corrected. Um,
That's right.
okay, so then but it is supporting this chain of evil of,
That's right. But why is it? Because the vast majority of people are volunteering. It wouldn't be supporting this chain of evil if millions of hardworking, honest Americans just filed their 15103 every year. Yeah, we don't. This is an empire. Since March 9th, 1933, the American limited government, constitutional government, was ousted, and what was imposed was an emergency war power military government. And from that point on, they started building the empire. Actually, they started before that, but the government wasn't in place to build it. But it's been in place since March 9th, 1933, and that's why this military government imposes communist dictatorships around the world, including here. This is why it wages its wars as papal crusades for the Pope to restore the temporal power of the Pope, the political power of the Pope around the world. And that's by way of military dictators, whether it be an African dictator in Africa or a communist dictator in Russia or China, doesn't matter. They're all dictators with absolute powers that are not limited, and that's the work of the Jesuits because they're absolutists. So that's why they use this government to finance communism around the world. This government in Washington built the USSR. This government, the military government in Washington, put Mao Zedong in power. It built the Chinese Communist military. Bill Clinton gave them all their high technology. You can read this in a book called The Year of the Rat. This military government has built all these huge enemies to wage war against us in the future. And so, therefore, we are not going to finance this military government in Washington voluntarily. So it can build this host of enemies against us to invade us, because that's what they're planning on. I wrote about it in my book, Vatican Assassins. It's called the Sino-Chinese, Sino-Soviet, Russian, Muslim invasion. And that's what they're planning on. That's why they built Saudi Arabia. That's why they built Russia. That's why they built China. That's why they're building Sunni Islam. The whole purpose for the war in Iraq is destroy the Shia and then rebuild a second Sunni caliphate out of their new capital in Baghdad, so that they can have Baghdad, Beijing, and Moscow all in agreement for our invasion in the future. That's why Joe Biden gave $85 billion worth of military to the Taliban for the building of the Sunni caliphate. That's why Biden gave another 80 billion, or how much did he give to Ukraine? It's because the war in Ukraine is over. Russia's going to get it all, and they're going to get all the weapons that were given to Ukraine for the further building of their military. So, and China's been given everything. China's been given all of our technology, all of our aluminum smelting plants. There's 21 aluminum smelting plants on the borders of Red China. It's still Red China. It hates God, it hates the Bible, kills its Christian people, puts them in concentration camps, harvests their organs. This is Jesuit government. Jesuit communist government. And so, no, we have an obligation not to volunteer to pay this income tax, because as Erwin Schiff, although he was wrong, I went to see him in Philadelphia many, many years ago when I had my two little boys. He said, "You're financing your own destruction." And he was right, but he didn't know why. But we know. And so, you're not an employer, trade, or business. And you know what that is? 15103 every year, and they're going to leave you alone. They'll never even seize your bank account.
I love that. That was great, Eric. I told her, like, you don't hold anything back. And it's the truth, like not too many people are speaking about this, and they don't know how deeply rooted it is. So I have people commenting, love it. Someone asked about your class. So let's try and connect people to that information, because it is, guys, you have to arm yourself with the knowledge. Like, you really, and this is knowledge you have to have, because if you just can't go through the motions. You have to understand why you're doing it, right? So
the Bible's clear. My people perish for lack of knowledge.
Yep.
Knowledge is essential if we are not to perish or be consumed. And the wonderful thing is, it's simple. Anybody can understand it. You don't have to be a private citizen to do this. I would prefer that you are, but you don't have to be. Take the tax class. Tax class is $2,000 for 2 days. I prefer that you come so I can teach you personally, but if you want to do it online, we can do that too. But you get a book, you get my ebook, you get a drive. You have everything in there to do it yourself. And I teach you how to do it yourself. I teach you the history leading up to it, and I teach you how to do it yourself, and you're good to go. You never need me again. You got the templates in a drive, and you just do it every year.
It's worth every penny because it will save you a lot of money.
And a lot of grief, because you file a tax return, they decide to audit you, they'll put you through hell. I've been through a couple of them. And no more audits because you have no gross income. Remember, you file a 15103, they can't charge you with willful failure to file. They can't charge you with income tax evasion. Can't hit you over the head with those two hammers anymore because you're filing and you have, therefore, the willful failure to file. And there's no income tax evasion because you didn't say you had gross income and took deductions. So there's no gross income at all. No deductions, no itemized deductions, none of that. The only reason you ever need a CPA anymore is that you can just keep track of your what came in and what went out. But none of it's taxable because there's no gross income. You can sell your business and it's not a problem.
We have another question. Hold on. You can take his course. He's in Pennsylvania, but you can take it online as well. He can do, I don't know, maybe Zoom or what would you do, Eric?
Yeah, we do Zoom. Generally, it's Google Meets, but I think we've gone to Zoom right now. So when you decide to take it, I have a guy that coordinates it for me. His name is Jim Atkins. He gets in contact with you, welcomes you to class, gives you when the date's going to be, the time, and then you just click a link. It takes you right to the class, right to the Zoom in, and then we can begin. And that's it.
Fantastic. And how can people connect with you?
They can. You can send me an email at R like Robert, B like boy, P like Paul, B like boy, church, CHURCH, at Comcast.net. And say you're interested, and I'll reply, and then I'll forward it to Jim, and then he'll work with you from there, and then we'll set a date. I don't like to have a bunch of big people in classes. 4, 6 is plenty for me. I've never had 6, but I've had 2, maybe 3.
No,
that way I can be personal.
4.
4 is enough. I've got 4 is enough. So I can just schedule classes as people contact me, and then we'll have it. If I don't have 4, that's fine. I'll do it for 1.
Yeah, I mean, he's willing to help anyone who wants the information. So yeah, it's a 2-day course. It's intense, but you're gonna, like Eric said, you're gonna walk out, you're never gonna need him again, and you're gonna have all the info you need and to refer back to, because the one thing that my husband caught was the court case where the guy thought he did everything right and then he ended up going to jail, and the one thing that he was missing was sending the 30-page affidavit every single year and filing every single year. So
that's right. That's exactly right. One other guy, he filed a form 4852. We don't do that. That's when an employer doesn't send a W-2 or 1099, so you're going to do it for them. That's gross income. You file that form, you're going to jail. When you say 0. For a tax return that says 0 income is a frivolous tax return, they'll find you $5,000. They did it for me for 6 years. I know exactly what I'm talking about. So, no. You got it. This is the right theory, but if you file the wrong form, you got a problem. So the right form, the only form, is Form 15103. I got other guys, they want to file. Well, we're going to file a non-resident anti-tax return. What for? You can only file a tax return if you have gross income. Doesn't make any difference anyway. Whether it's non-resident alien tax return or a regular tax return, it doesn't make any difference because on both documents, you're claiming that you have gross income. You never, 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 never have gross income if you're working in the private sector. If you're not a quote unquote employee, not a quote unquote trade or business. You just keep it simple.
Yeah.
Once you take the class, we review the entire 30-page affidavit in one day. I kind of get through all the little details in the first day. The second day is 15103 and the affidavit. And that's what we do. And as you see, as things begin to unfold in your understanding, when you read that affidavit, and it's just the Supreme Court decisions that they've said, then it's crystal clear. And the blinders are off. You now see the truth. You know what to do, and you don't need me ever again. And you can teach your friends too, if you want to. I'm not going to be jealous about, if you use this information to help your family members or friends or something. I mean, it's nice to be able to have a few gifts in teaching this, but we're in desperate situations. And so I don't really mind if you're going to teach your friends or whatever, if you're going to do it.
That's absolutely right. And the more people who have this knowledge, the more, it's less in their pocket.
That's right. You get your hard-earned cash. You're not spending your labor for nothing, which is what a slave is. A slave expends his labor for nothing. You're not going to do that anymore. You're going to get paid. And then the same principles in not volunteering to pay the income tax are the same principles that you're going to be able to get out of property tax. The property tax is an indirect ad valorem excise tax on the privilege to hold property. And when you assert your right to hold your property as a fundamental right, they can't put the property tax on you, just like they can't excise income tax you. It's the same exact law, same thing. So you get the income tax straightened around and you learn how to do your property, your residential property.
I mean, it's not amazing. Like, for those who are listening, like, isn't that awesome to know that? But it's also infuriating to know, because how the injustice behind it.
It is. It's all about the Jesuit order, the Counter-Reformation Jesuit order, destroying the historic white Anglo-Saxon Protestant middle class and everybody else that's become part of the middle class as a result of the Protestant Reformation and the Bible in the hands of the common man. So, to destroy the Reformation with the Jesuit order's Counter-Reformation, you have to destroy the middle class. So we'll tax them. Exactly what they're doing. So we'll tax them to death with an income tax, we'll tax them to death with property tax. And then when you take that property tax and finance that socialist communist NEA that's busy teaching your children how to be homosexuals and lesbians and transvestites and every other damnable thing, that destroys you cannot have a nation permitting sodomy. Any nation that does that will be destroyed. Rome is an example, Greece is an example, and Germany is our most recent example. It was full of homosexuals running the Third Reich, including Hitler.
Yep.
So, point being is that as a Christian man, Christian woman, we are to resist unto blood, striving against sin. Hebrews 12:4. All that is sin, so therefore we do the best we can to resist it. And the first thing is we do not volunteer anymore. The property tax is voluntary. The income tax is voluntary. On federal, state, county level, we're not volunteering anymore.
Definitely not. And when you say no more, it's very liberating, because the root of the systems that are binding us. I'd rather know the information we know, as hard as it is, and be an outcast in many ways, than not know, because like you said, in the Bible, in Proverbs, many times it says wisdom is worth more than rubies, and wisdom is everything. It's the most valuable thing.
The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, the beginning of wisdom. So we fear him. We fear him to do evil. I fear the Lord to do evil. I love him to do good. But it balances out the fear of the Lord, the love of the Lord. So since we fear him to do evil, we don't want to do evil. And if we volunteer to pay these monies, we're doing evil. Mm-hmm. The problem is we have to know. So now that the people that are listening know it, then they have that much more confidence not to do it, and the proper procedure to not do it without having to be prosecuted and sent to jail for losing your property.
Well, this was great, Eric. Thank you so much. You know, this helped, everyone who was on here, and I know, when I share it with others who weren't able to join in, they're going to receive the information really well, because it's powerful. It's powerful knowledge. This is the root of the destruction of our country and what is happening. And if we can get to the root of the problem and have a solid solution, why wouldn't we do it?
Correct. Our solution is in the law. And because the Congress, I should say, don't blame the IRS, blame the Congress. The Congress knows its limitations when it defines terms for the statutes that they use. And so they've been very careful not to go beyond their limitations. But the IRS has been trained to intimidate you, to take you beyond those limitations voluntarily. They're bullies. So we know the law, we don't have to be bullied. And there are some honest IRS agents, believe it or not. And I know 2 of them in Austin, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Both women. Yep.
Well, great. We have your info for them to reach out for the class, and I have a feeling a few people will definitely be doing that. And again, thanks, Eric. Your knowledge that you share is just, we're just very grateful, and it's been a pleasure learning from you all of these things. And again, guys, he also wrote a book called Vatican Assassins, which is a massive book. But it really goes into depth. I haven't read it because I've been, a mom for like pretty much ever since I met Eric, and haven't had time. But, I took his private citizen course prior to the tax course, and he goes into depth about the Jesuits and who they are, and how they, like I said, have trickled into every single sector of our society and are the core of, we think it's the Freemasons or the Illuminati, and but they're nothing. They are nothing. It goes all the way up to the Jesuits, the Black Pope, and then it comes and trickles down. So it's very.
I share the Jesuits founded the Illuminati. I share the Jesuits run all 800 secret societies. I tell you how they completely authored all Scottish Rite Freemasonry, Grand Orient, B'nai B'rith of the Jews, Prince Hall rites of the Blacks. The Jesuits run all of them because they wrote all the rites for them, and they coordinate them together in the destruction of Western civilization born out of the Protestant Reformation. So you get that all in my private citizenship class, so you might want to take that too. But take the tax class first, start being able to save your money, and then if you want to take the private citizenship class, you can. Absolutely, because both are incredibly valuable. But yeah, thanks so much, Eric, and I will definitely be talking. And okay, Tanya, Lord bless, and Lord bless all your listeners, and thanks for having me on. You too, Eric. Thank you so much. Lord bless to you too. Okay, bye-bye. Okay, so Eric hopped off, and hold on.